Was the 2018 MacBook Pro really that bad? Yes, but also no, and also it's kind of complicated and depends on your workflow. Listen, it's not going to be a video that you all are going to agree on, but there are things, both good and bad, that we have to thank the MacBook Pro of this design for, because it changed the MacBook Pro lineup as a whole, and to some degree, it even changed Apple. So, just for context, in this video, we are going to be going from good to bad, back to good, back to bad, so you have some idea of where this video is headed. But with all that being said, let's get started. So starting off with some of the good stuff, as you could tell by those very flashy clips, this MacBook Pro looks damn good. In fact, I would say this is one of the best looking Macs that they have ever made. But looks and size aren't everything. But to some working professionals like myself, it does make a difference in your day-to-day workflow. This is less of a high-performance, massive laptop like you would expect from a gaming computer, and more of an ultra-thin and still fairly powerful mid-grade workstation that I can set up in a desktop configuration and do all my work, but then unplug it and just take it with me when I need to go. And so with that, there are very, very big implications for the people who are doing a lot of work on the go. So with Apple working to make their designs functional, but significantly thinner, you end up with this nice balance of portability and performance. However, there are things that they did sacrifice on with this first good point that leads us into the first bad point, which is thermals. So it's kind of become a meme at this point that this Core i9 MacBook Pro was the hottest laptop of the year. Get it? But in all seriousness, legitimately this laptop is very hot. It's less of a laptop and more of a nearby tabletop because it gets uncomfortably warm when you use it in anything more than web browsing. Video editing, heavier photo editing, Photoshop with layers, that kind of stuff. It gets extremely hot, and it's usually best to use it in sort of a tabletop configuration, or in, like what I do, I can usually hook it up to a docking station, and that actually kind of helps the thermals, because with it being closed and upright, the air can move vertically like hot air is supposed to do, and not horizontally like the laptop tries to make it do. But those little things that fix some of the issues don't really forgive the inexcusable lack of cooling on this laptop. And for better or for worse, it did give us the dramatically improved thermals of the 16-inch MacBook Pro, which is performing better, stays above clock speeds like it's supposed to, and doesn't actually have to throttle back or run at almost 100 degrees Celsius the entire time you're using it. I don't care what anybody says about the early on thermal management bug that this thing had. Like, even with that, it's still a hot laptop. But fortunately, from the almost ashes of what was almost the fires of this MacBook Pro, we ended up getting the awesome, more refined, better cooled 16-inch MacBook Pro. So there's your plus. It's just unfortunate that we, power users who actually needed the i9 performance, got the 15-inch expecting that kind of performance and kind of got burned. But sticking to the topic of internal components, there is a plus to this, which is that the internal hardware choices of this MacBook Pro with the i9 8th generation, so new, fast and vast amounts of RAM, all the way up to 32 gigabytes with the newer standard of DDR4, as well as things like the graphics upgrades, the solid-state drive. This showed a renewed vow from Apple to keep their power users up to date with the latest hardware, especially considering that this came out, and I bought it when it launched, and it gave me the 560X graphics. And only a couple months, I believe 4 months later, they dropped an update for this, a new version with the upgraded Vega series graphics, which sucked for me because I was an early adopter who didn't get to play with those benefits. But the fact that they are actually keeping these laptops up to date shows that they are trying to keep not just this MacBook Pro, but things like the iMac, hopefully the Mac Mini, the Mac Pro, these are all more high-end, sort of closer to actual pro-level devices that they are keeping up to date with the latest hardware. So I kind of feel like gone are the days where Apple will sit for literally a decade on one platform and not change it. And I feel like this is the start of them pushing the correct, the new, the better hardware into their existing devices so that users have more options just like their PC counterparts. So again, back and forth. There's your positive, despite the fact that the internal choices initially weren't that great. And I just hope that generation over generation, these changes, these philosophies, as Apple likes to use that term, will carry over into other devices as we move on and permeate their entire Mac lineup if I had my way. But as I was writing this review, there was one thing about this computer that was just looming over me like a monster in a horror movie, which kept whispering in my ear, keyboard, keyboard. And yeah, the keyboard on this is just not that good. Well, there's a problem with it, obviously. You guys know the dust issue with the butterfly keyboards that has plagued every, well, not mine, but a lot of MacBook Pros, and I'll get to why I don't think mine was affected very shortly, but just from 2015 forward, this butterfly key switch mechanism just was doomed because of the sensitivity to dust, the low key travel, the unfortunately uncomfortable way you have to type on it. I mean, you type normally, but there's no travel, and it feels almost like you're just smacking your fingers on the keycaps. But don't get me wrong, that doesn't mean that I'm a big fan of like chunky mechanical keyboards. There's a few mechanical keyboards I actually like, especially this one. Apple IIc, just, I love that keyboard. It's just that I have a sweet spot for well-designed and comfortable keyboards. Doesn't have to be this giant mechanical monster, doesn't have to be a membrane keyboard, I'm not an elitist, but for my desktop setup for video work on the Mac side, I literally just use the Magic Keyboard, and actually I use the Magic Trackpad. My desktop setup is fairly close to a laptop configuration if I moved the trackpad down, which I'm not going to do, but I like the gesture, so I'm going to keep using it anyway. So yeah, my default keyboard for most of the big work that I do is a Magic Keyboard, but that uses a scissor mechanism, very similar to what the old MacBook Pro used, so it feels way more comfortable to type on for long periods of time. And on my PC setup, I have a mechanical keyboard, one of the only mechanical keyboards that I actually like, apart from, of course, the Apple IIc's keyboard, which is the Logitech G710 Plus, in my opinion, the best keyboard they have ever made. But in both of those setups, that means that I rarely ever used the butterfly key mechanism that everybody hated so much, and I kind of figured that's why my system hasn't run across the same failure that a lot of others have. I did have a scare with the spacebar, but I just mashed it a bunch until it went away and started working properly again. With me sitting down to write this review, I did take my laptop out and use it specifically as a laptop, which is how I learned about the thermals being very uncomfortable for the second time. I had used that part before, so I was familiar, but the keyboard was one that I had never really spent a prolonged amount of time typing on. Most of my typing was in bursts, and I can do that very well, but the harshness of the keys, the hard click, click, clack that you get, they're not as soft as, oddly, the same mechanism in the iPad Pro keyboard. They're very clicky, which I like, but they're hard clicky, which I don't like. They're almost too aggressive with their snap keys. It's weird, I don't know. I don't exactly know how to describe it. But just like with the other negatives, there is a positive to this. And no, before you ask, the positive is not this keyboard. This keyboard is unacceptable. I've used 1998 iBook keyboards that are better. So no, this keyboard is unacceptable. The positive has more to do with Apple. Apple actually listened. It's crazy, right? They listened. I do remember the last time they actually went back on a technology that didn't work. You want to know what it was? The iPod Shuffle, back when Steve Jobs was at the helm. They literally made an iPod Shuffle with no buttons. Anybody remember that? I had one. Anybody else? And they went back and put buttons on it because they realized that users didn't want to have to use the little microphone remote thing on the headset to do everything and rely on voice control. So they put buttons back on the iPod Touch. That's the last time I remember them going back on a technology because of how much backlash there was for that specific product. But this time around, They went back to the scissor key mechanism that they had on the previous MacBook Pros. And you know what? Having typed on it, it is phenomenal. It is still a slightly shorter travel than what you had on something like the last Retina MacBook Pro before this model, but it's better than this scissor key mechanism, and I guarantee you it will be substantially more reliable. People often ask me when they're looking to get an iPhone if I think that they will ever bring Touch ID back to the iPhone, and my answer is usually no, and because when Apple ditches a technology for something they think is better, they very rarely, if ever, go back to doing what they did before, because in their eyes it's worse. But with what they did to this MacBook Pro and changing it from the butterfly key mechanism that they initially thought was better and going to scissor keys, that's a whole new Apple. Which means that now when people ask me that question, I can't simply say no. I just have to say, I'm not sure anymore. Because with Apple listening to their users, more so in the Pro market, but who knows, they put Pro in the iPhone name, so maybe that'll come back too. They are doing something to old school long-term Apple users like myself that I would have never expected, which is throwing them off. Apple is very pattern-based, but this is a pattern I've never seen from them before. So even though this keyboard is a dumpster fire, and not quite on fire yet, I'm not doing any rendering yet, more thermal jokes, it's fine. This really does change Apple and the way people will perceive them because somebody or some group is listening. So while there is no positive to be found in the actual physicality of this keyboard, there is a big positive to be found with the fact that Apple is listening. Minor thing I forgot to mention is the touch bar when I'm talking about the keyboard. I personally love the touch bar. I think there's nothing wrong with it. I think adding the escape key was pretty much the only thing I would have critiqued, and they did add that in the 16-inch version. Touch ID, it's weird that it's like physically a part of the touch bar. It does feel a little weird, so having it separate as well was a good move, but I think by putting Touch ID on the MacBook Pros, the only thing that would have been better was Face ID, but in terms of the touch bar, its functionality, I have found very useful. I know not many people have, or some people haven't. The loudest majority seems to sound like they don't like it. I prefer it, but yeah, that's all I meant to add with that. Now, if you all have been following along, we're on to a positive, and I want to end on a high note, but this is a high note for me, and very well maybe something more controversial for you. My top and probably most debatable preference and positive for this series of MacBook Pros is Apple's choice to exclusively use Thunderbolt 3. And before you go off and tell me that you can go and buy a laptop with USB and a CD drive, and hell, let's throw in a floppy drive and an SD card reader, and let's do FireWire for a good measure. Before you leave that comment, let me explain myself. The inherent problem with laptops is that everyone is different, and everybody has different needs. So, when it comes to a laptop, you can only really, as a manufacturer, hope that some of the ports you throw onto that laptop won't affect the battery life, won't affect the size, won't affect the performance, but will also help people who need that one type of port. And who knows, there may be 3 ports that go completely unused on your laptop because there's only 2 that your end user ends up needing. The only way to get a system that is 100% what you need, no frills, no extras, is to build something like a custom PC where you pick the expansion cards you need, you pick the graphics you want, you pick the processor, you pick the RAM, everything, storage, you name it, you pick all of that. But you have to build it, or you have to have somebody else build it, and you completely give up your option for portability because laptops, the port portion of a laptop is fixed. That's not going anywhere. That is how the case was designed, so you're not getting anything else. Thunderbolt 3, whether you agree with me or not, fixes that problem for several reasons. The first one being that it uses a USB Type-C standard and then some. I have several friends who are professional photographers who literally carry around a 13-inch MacBook Pro with two of these USB Type-C ports because all they need is an SD card reader for their camera because they put everything on the internal storage. That's what they invested in from the factory, and then having just a couple ports on there that let them charge it and then lets them plug in an SD card. That's all they need. And for the work that I do here, I personally have 2 setups. I have an on-the-go setup and I have a desktop setup. And the on-the-go setup is the simplest of the 2 because all I have is a simple hub that I plug into the side of the laptop and I can still charge it. I still have another USB Type-C port that I can use, 2 USBs, SD card readers, and I get an HDMI port at the top. Now, That's more than what I need. I need one SD card reader and maybe a USB port. I've never used the HDMI output on this. I've once used the micro SD card reader on it, and I've really just used those two ports, the SD card reader and the USB, whether it be C or A. And when it comes to the desktop setup, I have it condensed down to 2 items. A Thunderbolt hub, which essentially just acts as a pass-through for my hard drives and occasionally works as a connection for my main server, and an eGPU for faster renders on 4K videos like these, or any of my reaction videos that have a lot of layers. It speeds things up. And it does give me a few USB ports, but I really only use one of them, and that's just for a time machine backup. And all of that, the GPU, 2 hard drives, my mic and my webcam I guess can also be counted. All of that is done with 2 cables, and one of those 2 cables charges my laptop. If I were to try to do this exact same setup with a PC, I would end up needing 13 different screws. I would need 2 expansion card slots, 2 hard drives, not counting the solid state drive to run the operating system. I would also then need 2 DisplayPort cables, a bunch of power cords, and about 20 minutes of my time. And it's still not portable. This I can plug in seconds and be working on a desktop grade level. And when I'm done, I just hit the eject for the hard drives and for the eGPU, unplug those 2 cables, pick the laptop up, and I'm on my way. That's it. That is, for most on-the-go professionals, the dream. Set it down, plug it in, do your work, unplug it, and leave. That's it. So while I do completely understand the frustration from people who don't want to have to carry around an adapter everywhere, believe me, I get it. There's something nice and something very convenient about the flexibility of just grabbing one adapter that you need and having it with you at all times, without having 4 or 5 extra ports on your laptop that you're never ever going to use. So yeah, having to carry an adapter can be a bit of a pain. That's why I actually have most of my stuff already converted over to Thunderbolt 3. The only thing that I don't have, like I said, are SD cards, and I have a reader for that. So having the flexibility is something that I know, and that I know several people love, and those people are more professional than me. They actually are doing photography professionally. I just do it as a hobby. But they like that flexibility because they don't have to worry at the end of the day about, am I going to get a laptop with the right ports? Which one should I get? They just buy a Thunderbolt 3 MacBook Pro and an adapter, and they're ready to go. So while the 15-inch MacBook Pro may be seen as one of the biggest missteps in Apple's long line of laptops, there are many things that it did that ushered in a significantly better laptop and, in a lot of ways, a significantly better Apple. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. Thanks for watching, by the way, through this entire video. I know this one was a little longer. I put a lot of work into the script, into the video production. I put so much time and effort into this, which is partly why later into next year I'm going to be launching my own tech channel. Just tech, all day, all the time. That's it. But for now, it's on this channel. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Please make sure to like and subscribe. It really does mean a lot to me when you do that. And let me know in the comments what you guys think. Do you agree with anything that I said? Maybe you do, maybe you don't. Fine by me either way. But either way, guys, thanks for watching, and I'll see you all in the next video. Make sure to be there, and have a good one. Hey guys, just hopping in at the end here. Thanks for watching through the whole video. I hope you enjoyed it. I do still have merch. I've actually had it for quite a while, but not a lot of people know about it or care. And so if you guys want to support me or check it out just because it looks cool, go to the link in the description. You can see some of the designs I have, like the Steel Frodo in Steins Gate design, or even the Mob Psycho 100 design, and maybe even buy one if you like it, or don't. I cried myself to sleep at night anyway. So either way, guys, hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching again, and I'll see you in the next one.